With CS2 releasing last night, being pushed out into being live for everybody, there's been a myriad of comments and vitriol and praise and really all kinds of opinions being thrown out there on social media from a wide variety of ex-players and analysts and casters and just ordinary run-of-the-mill players just looking to try and enjoy it casually. And I've been asked so many times on stream, because I've been streaming this game a hell of a lot over the last week or two, putting a lot of time into this game and trying to really understand it and learn it as best as possible. My opinions: do I think it's good? Do I think it's bad? Where do I think it needs to improve? And how do I think it's going to fare compared to CSGO at its prime? And so I thought I'd just make this video and address a few of those things, because some of the comments I've seen have really confused me. And it seems like there's not much nuance to these discussions. It feels like most people fall on either side of the spectrum. They either love CS2 or they hate it. They either think it's the best thing ever, or they think it's the worst thing that's going to fail, and CS is dead as a franchise. I've legitimately seen all these comments many, many times over. I'm going to keep this balanced though, because I don't think that it's flawless. I don't think CS2 is perfection right yet. And it's in a bit of a strange state as far as I'm concerned, but I also think there is a lot of pros looking at this from trying to be as objective as possible. I think there's a lot of pros that people are often overlooking or not really paying much attention to. I want to start with the cons and I'll get into the pros. And of course, as ever, if you have any of your own opinions on this one, then by all means comment in the section below and let me know. Or if you're just enjoying the game in general now that you've got your hands on it. So, going through the cons, one of the biggest problems for me that I ran into in the beta in multiple maps was the collision or desync or rubber banding or whatever you want to call it. Now, I will say that last night when they released, they also made a patch saying that they'd improved the player-to-player collisions, and from playing about 6 maps overall myself, I didn't notice that they were as bad, so I think it has been improved in that regard, to be fair. However, I still got some. And it's not just player-to-player collision that's a problem. Now, I realize a lot of people that play CS also probably don't play Hunt Showdown. It's another FPS game. I won't get into the nuances of it. Basically, Hunt for the longest time had a problem with desyncing, where you'd be on the edge of like a staircase or something and you'd just be thrown off. Or suddenly you'd rubber band back to where you were 2 seconds prior or something like that. And at times CS2 feels like that to me. I get PTSD from playing Hunt. I get those same feelings again of like, oh my god, I'm being thrown off like a stairway, or I'm being rubber banded back into this area, or I can't move, or I'm sliding too far when I stopped about 5 minutes ago. You know, these are issues that I still experienced in those 6 games that I played after launch, when apparently some of these had been fixed or at least tweaked somewhat. They're still there, they're still prevalent. And in a game like CS, that at the very top level, for example, which is where I mainly focus as a commentator, is that if you're getting this at the top sort of 0.1% of pro play, that can be the difference between someone winning and losing a match. This is unacceptable at that level. Unfortunately, it is. And it's why I personally think that this was pushed out a little bit too soon. I'm understanding that they wanted to push it out, but I feel like they should have kept it beta a bit longer, personally. That's my overall take from this. Next issue is the registration feels random. It feels super, super random. Now, I'm not going to sit here and pretend that I'm an expert on networking, or I'm an expert when it comes to tick rates or servers or how the programming works or any of those things in between. I'm certainly not. But I am somebody that's played FPS games for the better part of 30 years, and someone that's played FPS games to a very, very high level, and also somebody that works within an industry where it's very important for me to know what I'm talking about when it comes to FPS games and how the game feels, how it looks, and how it responds. And I'm telling you right now, the registration in this game sometimes is absolute batshit crazy and makes no sense at all. For example, and I'll link this in the description box below if you guys want to check it out. It's only a 7-10 second clip. On Overpass last night, I got running, jumped, burst fire glocked in the head, and all I could see was his legs. And instantly just burst fired in the air. The guy wasn't cheating. He wasn't dodgy at all. He just landed this shot. Now, can that happen in CSGO? Sure, it is possible to happen in CSGO. That's happened to me about 5 or 6 times. That's the difference. It's happening way more frequently. And because the registration is all over the place, and sometimes you'll shoot bullets through people, and you don't know where the hell it's gone, that's also something that happened in CSGO, to be fair. But it happens a lot more regularly here than it did in CSGO. And because you also have issues with people desyncing, which also messes with registration, I'm sure, you're starting to notice way more peekers advantage, in my opinion, in CS2 than CSGO ever had. The peekers advantage in this game is out of control, to the extent where it is a viable, reasonable tactic now, and I'm talking at 15, 20,000 elo, which is like past global elite and above, to be at those elos and run and gun with 5 SMG players and just literally hold W and just win rounds. Because you can zip around corners, jump around corners, and headshot people. Like on Inferno, expect CTs to just be pushing everything. Smokes, apps, second mid, banana. They're going to be pushing everything with P90s. The amount of times I've lost games and lost rounds because of 5 P90s is insane. It was never that prolific in CSGO. Ever. And it's because of the peekers advantage and because of the registration issues. Next up, when you put this in conjunction with the previous two, it's especially egregious and especially bad. There are some FPS issues and stutters. There is. I've noticed this myself, and just to make it clear, I have a very high-end PC which should easily be able to run CS2 and should have been easy to run CSGO. And when I get in and out of smokes and molotovs especially, my FPS tanks. It tanks hard. I'm talking like it drops by 100 to 200 FPS. It can be really, really rough when you're trying to peek around angles and someone decides to molly or smoke. Flashes also seem to mess me up really bad when it comes to FPS issues. And the micro stutters, I don't personally experience this much myself, but I've seen other people have horrible issues. Whether you're on NVIDIA or AMD, a lot of people are having so many issues when it comes to stutters and FPS problems. But, to be honest, are we going to pretend that CSGO never had those kind of problems as well? I don't think in all the years, in the 10,000 plus hours that I've put into CSGO, playing, casting, etc., from my PC, it's ever been that smooth. Ever. I've always had some issues with CSGO. I know some people are going to say that they didn't, and it was all super smooth for them, and I'm happy for you, congrats. A lot of people have had consistent issues with CSGO's performances. It has been a consistent problem, especially CPU-based plays rather than graphics. But the FPS issues and stutters, when you combine it with the registration, when you combine it with the collision and desync problems, can be really, really rough to play. Next is the sound, and as somebody that is very careful and very meticulous when it comes to sound, it's very, very important to me in games. Probably the most important thing, actually. This is one that triggers me probably the most. The sound in this game is not good. It is rough. It is very rough around the edges, I've got to be honest. When I played Nuke, especially in beta, when Nuke was first released, I had no idea what was going on. It was worse than CSGO was at its worst on Nuke, to put it in perspective. I would hear a footstep, it would sound like it was right next to me, and it was actually a player about 50 meters away on the other side of the map. No joke, in 1v1s I'd hear that. I would hear someone to my right-hand side, they'd actually be above me and to the left. It was all over the place. It was a complete mess. Now, they did add an EQ option into the game where you could go like crisp and quiet and things like that. I did mess around with the settings last night in those 6 games I'm talking about. It did slightly improve the sound, but it has not fixed the sound. The sound is still not great. So I'm hoping that gets worked on. This is one of the few things that I'm very like staunch on in terms of like it needs to be fixed as soon as possible, because I can understand the collision desync. The registration being random, I can deal with that for a while and hopefully it gets fixed. But the sound, as it stands right now, is in such a bad place that it's one of the biggest issues that I personally have with the game. And that's also because I'm super nitpicky when it comes to sound. And then finally, it's a smaller issue, but it definitely is a viable one because a lot of people are affected by this. But on launch, after being asked for the better part of 2 or 3 months, the game released without really important commands like CL right hand and Bob, etc. in the game. There's like probably 6 or 7 that people were asking for, and they've just been left out. They're still not in the game, which is very surprising to me. And again, goes back to what I said earlier, where I feel like this has been pushed out just prematurely. I feel like they said it had to be summer 2023, and so people were starting to get on their back. I'd much rather they just left this off for another 2 or 3 months, honestly, personally. You know, when a game comes out and says, we haven't finished it yet, guys, it needs a bit more time in the oven. I'm like, cool. You know, if you think that's going to mean that when you release the game, it's on point and it has no issues, then I'm completely down to wait an extra 2 or 3 months. I don't need it right now. I'd rather it was released when it was ready. And this feels like it's been pushed out slightly too soon, for me at least, because this is considered to be the release of CS2. Like, don't get it twisted. This isn't a beta anymore, right? If you go into the the Premier Elo system thing, and it used to have like beta, and it had have a specific score, and then it was like first season, second season. It's now registering as first season. This is the release of CS2. This is the actual release of CS2. So I feel like it's been pushed out a little bit prematurely. The other issue I had is a bit disappointing. I was hoping it would get released with all these issues fixed, but also with like really build on the hype and capitalize on the hype and release some cases or release an operation. I know it doesn't mean a lot to many people, but it's just an added thing that I had in the back of my mind. But I do have another thought on that, which I'll get back into in the pros. So one of the main pros I have is that it is very smooth, which I know is weird to say after I've mentioned about the collisions and the registration and the FPS issues. But when you're not having those problems, and to be fair, they maybe happen 2 or 3 times a match, right? It's not all the time, as some people will make you believe, or maybe it is all the time for them, but it's not for me. And when the game is running properly, it is a incredibly smooth experience. Far smoother than CSGO ever was. It feels like the FPS is better overall. It feels like the rounds are smoother overall. But you do run into those issues I've mentioned. The cons are still there. They're still prevalent. Which, if anything, I think exacerbates the problem. Because if you're having a really smooth ride, you know, let's say you're in a plane and you're having a really smooth flight, and then suddenly some turbulence hits out of nowhere unexpectedly, it's going to feel more of a shock than if you've been constantly bumping around and then you get a little bit more extreme turbulence. Bit of a shit example, but you get my point, I'm sure. So the game overall feels quite smooth to me most of the time. The menus feel smooth. The little quality of life improvements they've made to the UI and the menus in the main screens, etc., they all feel smooth. And that does add to the overall feeling. And now, obviously, that's one of my pros. As the pros go on, they're going to become more and more important for me. The last pro is by far the most important and kind of outweighs all of the other points. Next one, the game looks excellent. The colors are vibrant and they pop. Maps look fresh, they look rejuvenated, they look reinvigorated. It also adds to the issue that some people have when it comes to spotting agent skins with certain backgrounds. It feels like that's really gone into the thought process of a lot of the recoloring of these maps, and they look fantastic. You know, Inferno in particular, kind of like a complete overhaul in terms of the overall feel and art design of the map. Yes, it hasn't changed in terms of the actual mechanics of the map, but it's now this Italian like little village. It's really nice. It's really lovely, and a lot of these maps benefit from this. I think all of them, without exception, I think look far superior now than they ever did before, and it does add like a little, that fresh lick of paint does make a difference in my opinion to a lot of people. The refund and inventory system is also a really solid addition. Being able to refund a buy, which if you make a mistake it's nice to refund, but how many times have you dropped a teammate that's a random that isn't talking and you drop for him trying to be a good teammate, and he's got like $3,000 and he decides to force buy a FAMAS with no armor, and you're like, bro, I've dropped for you for now you can just refund. You're good to go. You don't get penalized as hard anymore if someone else is a dribbler. Or if somebody else makes that mistake by accident, they can refund, pick up your M4, and you're all good mates and everyone's okay. Really nice addition. I think it's a fantastic addition. Long overdue. Inventory system, being able to put in an A1S and an A4 on the same side of the CT. Really cool. Been asking for that for ages. Now we have it. Now you get to also pick and choose from different weapons in those categories, and I think it opens up more possibilities for new weapons in the future. It adds a different element of maybe tactics in the future. They're opening up for the future, and that's the thing that people are missing so much with this. This is effectively, yes, they forced it out. I completely agree with you. They did. This feels rushed. It does. But look at the possibilities that there are, right? Next up, the Premier rework system of the Elos. Really nice. I like it a lot, actually. I believe there's going to be incentives added in. I hope that there is. I hope the incentives are good, because if they are, I can see myself just playing Premier in future if they fix all the other issues with FPS, etc. It could be really good. And a way to pit yourself against everyone else on the planet in a centralized hub is really nice. I think that could be a huge W, honestly, overall. And people seem to be liking Premier mode right now, and for good reason. I think it's a really nice addition. But here's the biggest pro of all, okay? I said I'd leave it to last. It outweighs everything else, and it's why I come out of CS2 feeling incredibly optimistic. Yes, there's issues. I'm not going to sit here and put my fingers in my ears and my head in the sand and pretend this is the perfect game. It's not there yet. This is now Source 2. The possibilities and the capabilities have increased tenfold. What can be possible in this game is now so much superior. They were kind of hamstrung before in CSGO. Now they've released the shackles. And has it been a bit of a slow start? Sure, it has. There's been issues? Absolutely. But if you think of where CSGO beta was back 11, 12 years ago, and I remember, I even have a video on my YouTube. It's super cringe, but you can find it if you want to. I sound like I'm 12 years old. You can go back and watch that and see how terrible the CSGO beta was. And even me, as someone that could see the beta and thought, Christ, this is rough, I could see there was a gem underneath the rubble. CS2 is in nowhere near the same level as CSGO's beta was, or the early days of Counter-Strike Global Offensive. And look where CSGO got to. It's now at the point where it is the de facto, as far as CS fans are concerned, the best FPS shooter in esports ever of all time. And that's why CS2 is catching so much flack. It's their big shoes to fill, right? And it is effectively the same game upgraded, but people are holding it to the standards of prime CSGO. That's unreasonable right now. It is unreasonable. And think of the capabilities and the possibilities in the future. There are so many good things that could come after this. And yes, you are looking at the future, right? So I'm being very careful with this. I'm not getting carried away. It's possible they don't realize that potential. It's very possible. Maybe this is as good as it gets. I hope not, but maybe it is. But only time will tell. I think there's a reason to be optimistic about CS2. I really do. And I always try and keep on the optimistic side of things. There are issues, absolutely 100%. But I would expect that in the next few months, a lot of these problems are going to get fixed, are going to get resolved. And finally, I mentioned before how I was disappointed about how they didn't release, and I've seen other people say, oh my god, no operation, no case, like to release on the rebirth of Counter-Strike, as it were. I think it makes sense for them to actually hold off for a while. Fix these issues first, come out with a big patch, and then once the game is really good to go, then you release the hype. Then you release the operations, then you release the cases, then you release whatever the next big thing might be. I've heard some people say it could be like a compendium, you know, like Dota 2. If that's the case, awesome. But do that further down the line when the game is in a good place, where people are hyped, where they're happy, where a lot of these issues have been fixed. Anyway, that's my 2 cents, guys. I've tried to keep it as balanced as possible. I think I've mentioned everything there. I'm sure later on I'll think, oh, why didn't I put this point in? That's the way it goes. But anyway, if you agree or disagree, then do let me know below. And if you have any of your own points or you want to expand on any of the points that I've talked about, then of course also get involved. And I will see you guys in the next video. Peace.